This is Odette. I'm on level G, and I know exactly who's deleting the data and why. That voice rang out just as the entire U.S. congressional network was collapsing. No one knew who the woman was, nor could they understand how a forgotten basement librarian could trace an attack invisible even to the most advanced AI defense systems. But minutes later, the entire government froze. In the federal Capitol building, behind soundproof doors and red-carpeted corridors, there was a room nearly everyone had forgotten, Sublevel G, the archive of classified political documents, outdated maps, half-digitized files, and one solitary librarian. Her name was Odette Lamar, 62, from Haiti. No one greeted her each morning. No emails, no meetings. Only the scent of old paper, ink, and the occasional groan of a vintage photocopier echoed through her day. Odette took lunch from a small tin box, sipped tea brewed from dried leaves she brought from home. She took notes with a violet ink pen, sometimes pressing leaves between the pages of her files. She lived as if 1987 had never passed. 3 years ago, when the AI Automation for National Records project was approved, most of the archive staff were laid off. A new SaaS automation system was installed, paired with an AI-powered CRM tool to handle records automatically. They called it the future. A young tech assistant once chuckled and said to her, "You should retire, ma'am. These systems read documents better than people ever could." Odette didn't argue. She merely smiled, gently returning a red-stamped folder marked Censorship Regulation 1998 to its exact place, where no one else had bothered to look. What they didn't know was that before becoming the grumpy old librarian, Odette Lamar had been a code analyst for the NSA, serving in Cold War-era counterintelligence missions. She knew how to disappear. She knew how to read between lines, and, most importantly, she knew when things were too clean, which always meant something was being hidden. That morning, as usual, she unlocked the steel basement door, wiped the dust off the old CRT monitor, teacup in her left hand. She slid her right over the analog console wired to an ancient server. When the congressional network crashed, she heard a strange click in the old backup signal line. Adjusting her headset, she reconnected using a decommissioned internal protocol, one erased from the official system since 2012. A message blinked on screen. Unauthorized API access key, along with an identifier tracing to a VPN in Thailand, routed through an unregistered open-source platform. "How careless," Odette muttered. "They're still using the G-level network map from 1998, thinking no one remembers it." She opened a worn leather notebook, her companion for over 32 years. Every vulnerability, every retired code, every cable map was written there. On the final page, in brown ink, it read, "If the main system fails, check G-level auxiliary gate. Map 1998. Handles budget maps not yet digitized." She laid out a large format print, spread it on the table, and traced lines with a wooden ruler. Meanwhile, above in the technology committee room, cold bulletproof glass and LED walls, 14 people in gray suits were panicking. All files for the upcoming hearing on the $1.2 billion Autonomous AI Fund were locked. Internal networks frozen, screens flickering like haunted mirrors. The Secretary of Technology shouted into the secure line, "Why did the high-yield savings account model fail its update? Who accessed an unregistered API key?" A young engineer whispered, "Sir, the data leak is internal." Another specialist added, voice trembling, "We traced the insertion to an auxiliary file under the real estate fund forecast. It could be a fake cybersecurity breach disguised as a budget document." Silence fell, the kind that tastes metallic. And then, from a channel long thought dead, the old red technical line crackled to life. A voice spoke, clear and calm. "This is Odette Lamar. I'm on level G. I know exactly who's trying to delete the data and why." The room froze. No one, even the head of the system, remembered her name. But now, the woman they had dismissed as the ghost of the archives was the only one holding the original network maps, the handwritten patch logs, and the master key to trace the malware back to its source. Odette set her teacup down, careful not to let it smear the frayed edge of her notebook. On the yellowed page lay the internal network schematic, printed in 1998, the only remaining tool that let her see what no one else could. She peeled away the brown dust cover from the long disconnected copper cable board, then pulled out a dusty RS-232 connector. Her hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from a rare, quiet fury. The modern world had erased people like her, while relying on the very foundations they built. Upstairs, the Minister of Technology was shouting at the cybersecurity team. "What about the backups?" "Sir, backups were neutralized at 3:47 a.m. Someone deleted the manual redundancy chain, left just one unencrypted data tunnel. It points to an IP address in Bangkok." The technician didn't get to finish. The command room door slammed open. A woman entered, hair pulled back, AR glasses in place, navy suit flashing the seal of the Department of Homeland Intelligence. Everyone stood. "I'm Agent Myra Patel. This is a Level 4 cybersecurity breach. Anyone without clearance Level 5, leave. Now." Some looked ready to protest, but no one dared. A Level 5 breach meant potential exposure of international treaties or control protocols for defense AI systems. Meanwhile, in the silence of Sublevel G, Odette reached through the narrow gap of Cabinet 11, where 20-year-old budget archives were stored. Her fingers brushed a faded paper stamped in red. Appendix, Real Estate Forecast Fund, Confidential. The last auto-update timestamp read 3:47 a.m. Odette drew a deep breath. There was no doubt now. The attacker wasn't external. They were inside this building. On the fourth floor, in a secondary meeting room, the software team behind the AI Automation for National Records system was still arguing. Then Marcus, a young, awkward engineer with thick glasses, blurted out, "Wait! That digital signature scanner script from yesterday. It accessed the backup server on Level G, didn't it?" "Yeah, but G's abandoned, isn't it?" "Not entirely," Marcus whispered. "I saw someone once, an old lady with gray hair. She was still signing the checklist by hand. I thought it was just tradition." Back in the main command center, Agent Patel was scanning traffic logs when a new alert window lit up. "Manual signal detected, Level G, analog mode. Identity confirmed. O. Lamar, access key 42H099B. "Who's accessing Level G?" she demanded, eyes narrowing. No one answered. A flustered IT analyst stammered, "Level G isn't in the digital architecture map anymore. We removed it in 2019. Myra's jaw clenched. "Then it looks like you just forgot the only person who might be able to save this entire network." Down below, Odette had pulled out an ancient synchronization radio, once used to match timestamps between paper logs and digital entries. She connected it to a data port that had never once touched the internet. A line of code flashed on screen. "Manual sync override detected. Cloud security compliance temporarily bypassed. Confirm key, MB77. She froze. MB. She had seen that code in a loose memo that had fallen into her hands 2 years ago. Unsigned, 4 lines only. If Odette notices, switch to MB. Malware embedded in the real estate forecast map. No one checks paper logs anymore. MB equals manual backup, or murder the bookkeeper." Her fingers curled into a fist. For the first time in years, fear returned. Not fear of death, but of the truth being erased forever. Then a signal hit the internal network. Odette had sent a system log from last month attached with an old audio snippet. In it, 2 male voices whispered, "The malware's in the real estate investment forecast. Those senators won't know what to look for. Every update sends a silent command. What about the librarian? Go to MB if needed. No one cares about Level G." The voice clearly belonged to one of the 3 senior security officers, one of whom was standing right there in the command room. Suddenly, Every security system in the capital flashed red. Myra Patel received the log. Her eyes widened. Her voice went cold. Lock down all exits. I want the full audit trail of AI Core, now. And find someone named Odette Lamar. She is no longer just an old librarian. She's a living witness, and possibly the only person who can save this system.
Down in the archive's deepest chamber, Odette stood before the door to Auxiliary Server Room C, a space she had once overseen for 17 years. She pulled out a corroded bronze keycard. From her blouse, she unwrapped a cloth pouch. Inside it, the original API access key, the last physical copy, never uploaded to any cloud system. She whispered, "They thought they erased me from the map, but the real maps were always drawn by hand." And she swiped the card. The light turned green. The door opened. The dry click of the G-level lock echoed like the awakening of a long-forgotten world. Odette stepped into Auxiliary Server Room C, not with the frail gait of an elderly woman, but with the measured poise of a guardian returning to the place she once protected for 2 decades. There were no modern LEDs, only flickering fluorescent lights, casting wavering shadows on the walls as if time itself were flowing backward. She sat in an old swivel chair and activated the semi-mechanical control panel, untouched by any AI automation. Plugging into the auxiliary data port with the MB77 key, she began scanning through command logs. A strange directory appeared: Temp GeoBudget SysProxy. Beneath it, several files: Real Estate Fund Forecast v3.doc, VPN Override.key, signed by RV. Odette frowned. RV. There was only one person that could be: Rafael Velez, now a senator on the technology subcommittee, and once a summer intern, the only person she had ever truly trusted. Upstairs, Agent Myra Patel and her surveillance team were tracking the incoming logs from Level G. One engineer shouted, "We've got a response from G. Audio log just came in. It carries a SHA-2 hash matching the real estate budget update from last week." Myra gave the order. "Put it on speaker for the full coordination team." The audio echoed through the room, decrypted by Odette moments earlier. "Just inject the code into the real estate forecast. AI automation won't flag unstructured content." "What if it gets caught?" "Switch to MB. It'll look like a data sync error. If needed, there's a contingency." Then a third voice entered. "Ensure the capital exits clean. From Bangkok, the funds loop back through a spoofed open-source platform. Encrypted Bitcoin wallets will launder the trace." The room fell into stunned silence. Myra's fingers tightened on her headset. Her voice was razor-sharp. "That's the voice of Simon Crawley, Senior Budget Secretary. The man who was just honored as last year's Architect of Digital Finance." She didn't hesitate. "Revoke Crawley's access cards. Get tactical response in here. I want him in the internal conference room within 5 minutes." Back on Level G, Odette extracted the file, signed by RV, but she knew Raphael would never be reckless enough to sign off on malware himself. When the file opened, it revealed only a QR code and one line of text. "For the one who reads between the lines, meet me on the rooftop, 11:30. She allowed herself a faint smile. Raphael remembered. Back in the day, she had taught him Morse code by folding Post-it notes into origami beside his coffee cup. They were among the last who spoke in silent codes in a world where everything else was watched. Meanwhile, Crawley was panicking. He had just reached his private elevator when 2 men in black suits stepped in his path. "Mr. Crawley, you'll need to come with us." "There's an issue that needs clarification." Crawley paled. He turned to his aide and muttered, "Delete. Delete the Level G backup directory. Use override. Cache Flow Management 2022. But it was already too late. The system had just detected a ghost backup created by Odette 3 minutes earlier, saved not to the cloud, but to a physical disk linked to G-Level's isolated power grid. That backup, air-gapped and analog, was the one thing the tech conspirators hadn't anticipated.
an old librarian, and a server that never touched the internet. 11:30 a.m. Odette stepped onto the Capitol rooftop, where no surveillance cameras reached, only wind and the croak of crows gliding over the dome. Rafael Velez, now a senator, stood waiting. No suit, no pin, only the eyes of the young intern who once asked her how to decode light signals from deep-sea vessels. "I knew they'd come back here," he said, "and I knew only one person would still believe me," she replied. Raphael handed her a printed dossier, transaction records routed through anonymous cryptocurrency exchanges, along with forged credit score upgrades for senior political figures, all signed with the same digital key, RV. "They used my name," he said hoarsely, "to embed code in the budget files. I had no proof. Not until you reactivated the G-level signal." Odette didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her coat and pulled out a tiny cassette tape, a recording of 2021 phone calls from the archive's old landline system. In it, Raphael's voice reported being pressured to use V-level access to update the AI core mapping. She looked him in the eye. "You once asked me, when do you go against your superiors? The answer is, when the data is no longer honest." 1 hour later, Congress convened an emergency session. The Digital Sovereignty Firewall project, the shield behind AI control of the national economy, was suspended. Crawley's name was publicly exposed. A web of offshore data exports masked as API access for partner companies launched a full federal investigation. The head of national finance resigned. A classified report was leaked, revealing that malicious code had been inserted through an open-source educational AI ethics platform, repurposed to transmit covert data. That evening, in the quiet of Level G, Odette returned to her seat. She polished her reading glasses, then pressed them gently to a book page,
choosing the right moment to speak. 3 days later, inside the Grand Chamber of Congress, once reserved only for closed-door hearings and hollow political speeches, a new figure appeared for the first time. She held no title, had no staff, no press dossier, and no LinkedIn history. There was only a single wooden chair at the center, and a gray-haired woman in a plain brown coat stepped forward. The entire chamber rose at command, but she didn't look at them. She simply sat down, opened her notebook, and wrote a few lines. That quiet act, so simple it went almost unnoticed, was in truth her silent oath. The truth must be written by hand before it can be overwritten by code. Senator Rafael Velez was the first to speak. "We once placed our faith in AI as a cure-all solution, but today we must humbly admit we still need those who can see the cracks in the code, people like Ms. Odette Lamar." Scattered applause broke the silence, then swelled into a tidal wave. The Special Investigative Panel confirmed that the entire AI automation core system had been compromised through data packets disguised inside the real estate fund forecast files. These were slipped in via internal APIs and authorized using a falsified access key, embedded directly into the encryption core of an open-source platform that had been approved by none other than Crawley. A total of over $17.4 million had been laundered through Bitcoin wallets traced to Bangkok, eventually routing to a dropshipping account chain in Poland, using spoofed addresses and hacked credit scores from a fake rating system. Crawley was indicted under the Federal Public Integrity Act. In a closed court hearing, he hung his head and pled guilty, but refused to cooperate, claiming temporary memory loss. A tired old lie. But this time, the data didn't favor him. Odette had recorded it all, by hand. Every call, every audit tampering request he made, noted in her personal ledger. A young prosecutor told the press, "We didn't need AI to interpret Crawley's intent. We needed someone who preserved records immune to time and manipulation." As for Odette, she declined an offer to serve as senior advisor. She even turned down the special commendation reward worth $250,000. Instead, she asked, "Reopen the Level G archive room and send 5 students. I'll teach them how to read data, not on screens, but in context." A request that baffled the council, then quieted it, then earned their nods.
That evening, a special news broadcast reported on the woman who saved Congress from a data breach. But when the cameras caught Odette leaving the building, she said only one sentence. "I didn't save technology. I just remembered how to read between the lines." The following week, a group of students were assigned to Level G. At first, they expected dull clerical work, but after their first session, everything changed. Odette didn't lecture like a professor. She simply handed them folders and asked, if someone wanted to hide something, they wouldn't leave a trace, but they'd leave a breath. Do you see where the breath falters? At first, they didn't understand, but slowly, each of them began to notice. Timestamps that didn't match, sentences too clean, periods shifted by fractions, budget tables with missing footnotes. One student gasped, "Ma'am, the AI system didn't catch any of this." She smiled, because AI doesn't know how to doubt. It's built to verify, not to question. Then someone asked her, "Do you ever regret it? If you'd accepted the offer to be a lead engineer at the NSA back then, maybe you'd have your own SaaS automation startup by now." She simply laughed and shook her head. Technology is a tool, but justice is a choice, and I chose to be the one who keeps the ledger, not the one who builds the net. Sublevel G, once a forgotten space beneath the Capitol, was now the official training ground for the new AI Data Ethics and Traceability program. A small bronze plaque was mounted beside the door. Odette Lamar Data Ethics Archive in honor of the last gatekeeper. Some asked why there was no statue, no grand ceremony. She simply replied, "When silence is respected, it needs no applause." In the days that followed, Odette returned to her old rhythm. She still brewed tea in a copper kettle, still wrote in her notebook with violet ink. But now young students would occasionally pass by, some with questions, others hoping to hear again the tale of the 2003 disk that wouldn't spin, or the 1998 map, the one that saved a national system. One afternoon, as she scribbled quietly, there was a soft knock. It was Marcus, the young engineer from the AI automation team, the first to detect the odd signal from Level G. He carried a small, silver-gray box with a combination lock. "I'm sorry," he said, "forever thinking this floor was obsolete." She looked up at him, her eyes calm and without blame. "It wasn't your fault. You were programmed to believe that." Inside the box was something simple, an early generation key card, hand-etched with the code OL-001. It was the very first access pass ever issued to the internal retrieval system back in 1997, and it still worked. It could open every legacy archive door, especially those that AI couldn't access because they lacked what Marcus called emotional clearance. "I checked the source logs," Marcus said. "Every card has a personalized code string linked to its original user. And in the core documentation, the first line reads, and clear, I don't represent technology. And I'm not against it, but I believe some things must be preserved through trust, not encryption." Over the years, we believed in tireless systems, but forgot that fatigue is also a way to test our ethics. And sometimes, what saves us from catastrophe isn't tech. It's memory, a person who remembers, a person who still questions, a person who still believes that silence, when listened to the right way, can become evidence. The chamber rose in unison, but she simply nodded and left the stage as if even she wanted to slip back into the shadows after all that had passed. A week later, Congress passed new legislation on AI ethical auditing. It mandated that every national-level financial automation system must include a parallel paper archive, verified by human hands, inaccessible by code alone. Some began calling it the Lamar Doctrine. The media gave her names: the last data gatekeeper, the woman who beat AI with a pen, the human API. But she never read the headlines. She had no social media. Her phone still had buttons. She simply told her students, when you read a document, don't just look for the main idea. Look for the spaces between the lines. That's where lies like to hide. One rainy afternoon, a soft-spoken freshman named Aisha, her curly hair damp, hesitantly asked, "Ma'am, do you ever worry about being forgotten?" Odette looked up from an old folder, the flickering fluorescent light catching in her eyes. If someone once saved a nation from the margin of a book, then silence itself is a kind of anthem, and an anthem doesn't need the singer's name. Aisha blinked, then smiled, and nodded, as if understanding something no textbook had ever taught. That autumn, Congress established the Odette Lamar Scholarship Fund for students studying archival science and data ethics, but she agreed on one condition: don't put my name on any plaques. Just leave one line. On the lowest floor, someone still remembers what the system forgot. And so, like every day, she returned to her room on level G. No cameras, no chatbot asking what she needed, only the rustle of paper, the scratch of ink, and the quiet footsteps of a guardian. A nation was saved by a woman who no longer existed in the HR database, and that story, it would not be encrypted in a cloud. It would be written by hand. In a world increasingly governed by technology and artificial intelligence, the story of Odette Lamar reminds us of the irreplaceable power of human memory, of ethics, and of quiet courage. No modern tools or prestigious titles were needed. A forgotten woman beneath the Capitol floor became the final protector of truth. This takes one person willing to, quote, read between the lines and refuse to look away when justice is under threat. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share it with others who believe in the quiet power of the mind, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Every hero begins with a single question: what about you? Are you ready to ask yours?